Hello, this is Dr. Gary D. Seal with the TrueCon Consulting Group. Thank you for taking time to walk through this slide deck. The purpose of the presentation is not to exhaustively go through every slide, but to actually point you to a more exhaustive document which presents you with a great deal of detail on competitive analysis for your company. What we're going to do is look at competitive intelligence for a company. Now, we use three companies in the document, which include a data products company, an IT support company, I should say, also an industrial distribution company, and a manufacturing and services company. For the purposes of the PowerPoint, I've only presented slides which relate to the data services company. I would encourage you to think about your specific application as you look at each slide and apply it to where you would be doing your analysis. So we're going to be looking at those financial and operational benchmarks, your product, your market, also your talent and internal health, and then finally we'll provide you with multiple documents to help you ascertain where you're at in relationship to an expansion or some aspect of growing your business vigorously. Once again, I said we're going to use data management. Keep that in mind as an example. And we're going to look at company overviews, your constraints, employee retention, working capital, customer satisfaction, expansion readiness throughout the scope of the paper and the PowerPoint. The company that we will be exhibiting is a theoretical $10 million revenue, 50 employee data services and IT company. We'll look at their core services, where their revenue comes from, and then who their primary market is. I would encourage you, as again, once you see these slides, to take a look at where they fit for your particular company. One of the ways to evaluate your company and be objective about it is to look for an EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If you're comparing apples to oranges, so to speak, a different company in a different industry, this will help you understand a bottom line mentality on where to put your efforts. Now we know that every company has dependencies. I would encourage you to look at what you're relying on to make sure your company functions. For a database company, something like data centers, semiconductor supplies, skilled labor, and things of that nature. What pertains to you? And then semiconductor constraints. This is a specific line item in there. And we know that, for example, during COVID, semiconductors were difficult to come by because of labor shortages in the chip factories. What aspects of constraint impact your business? And then we know there are infrastructure risks. As you built out your company, you have certain strengths and perhaps vulnerabilities that you need to look at. For a data center company and a medium-sized business, we know that a data center failure would be catastrophic simply because that's an enormous capital undertaking to build one of these data centers, and there's enormous connection with other computing power around the world. If that connection fails, then that particular company is in trouble. What would put you at risk should you have an infrastructure failure? And then, of course, we always have to think about our workforce. In this particular industry, there are 4 or 5 potential issues in database administration, engineering, cybersecurity, tech support, and things of that nature. What critical job functions do you have in your company? Then we would be remiss if we didn't mention something in regards to generational preferences and attitudes as we look at hiring people and bringing them into the organization. I would encourage you to camp out here for a few moments, take a look at the generation that you're bringing on board and what their typical mentality looks like versus perhaps the founding generation or people in the baby boomer generation like myself. Cybersecurity, huge for these particular types of companies? What's another idiosyncrasy of an issue that could create a real problem for your company? For example, once again, since we're talking about people, talent shortages can be critical and crippling for any company, especially if you have high turnover rates. Strategic supply chain issues. So we want to take a look at these vulnerabilities and then how you can shore up those issues. Here's a short laundry list for this type of company. These sort of things will take a little brainstorming, perhaps some outside research through AI. It's a wise idea to have these contingencies planned out. And then we know that every company has a source of revenue or where their customers come from based on their product offering. For these guys, the primary issue is services, keeping the IT functions of their customers up and running, so to speak. What is your primary source of income? And then you want to figure that out by not only gross dollars, but also a percentage of the business that you have coming in. One of the things that's characteristic in today's marketplace is long-term contracts and how that means for your sales process, your service process, and also your retention rates on those customers. We want to make sure that you're paying close attention to those customers because of the long-term contracts. We certainly do not want to lose business. Employee retention. Why is this important? There's so much continuity that comes with having an experienced employee that knows the ropes, so to speak. Consequently, we want to make sure that we hire really high quality people and we do everything within our power to keep those people. We also know that there is a technology labor market out there for those of you who are in that arena. For this particular industry, it would be database administrators, cloud engineers, cybersecurity specialists, and software developers. What technology area or area of expertise applies to your company? Think through that. Make sure you put it in your document. Employee turnover drivers. What's going to keep your people leaving the organization? Well, the elephant in the room is almost always compensation, and then communication, upward mobility, lack of recognition, and then for the younger generation, inflexible policies. There are other things that apply to, especially your turnover rates. If you're in that arena, people want to be dealing with the latest technology. If you're ignoring the fact that AI is a force in the marketplace, look for some defections. Also, we want to look at leadership issues, workload imbalance, and management practices. Are you in touch with the cutting edge of what's going on in your business? And then what can we do to retain people? Action strategy you might pay for and include the fact that your people get these certifications. Leadership training, keeping in mind that anytime you pull somebody aside and say, we're going to give you extra training, that is a motivational factor. And we want to make sure, if at all possible, that there are some career pathways. I'm a strong believer in internal promotions. Intellectual property risk. Yes, you may have some specific software pertaining to your business that you do not want to be out in public. The metrics that you're gathering about your business should be proprietary and not shared with people. Your unique processes, customer information, by all means, only the people that absolutely need to have that. I do not recommend that you share customer information even in an advertising document. And then, of course, the technical documentation on your products, what makes it unique and what makes it proprietary, and the fact that you should not share it with the public. Your IP protection strategies, make sure access is limited, make sure there's some security monitoring, encrypt your communications, make sure you have signed employee agreements, and then have documentation controls. These things are key in today's world. So what we want to do now is look at working capital considerations, keeping in mind that different industries and different companies have different gross profit, net profit profiles. And from that standpoint, you could be in an issue if you have a long-term payables issue, if your companies are demanding quicker payment, and the fact that you're losing subscription business or you're retaining and gaining subscription ongoing revenues. Some industry challenges, at least for this particular industry: rising costs. Who's avoiding that? Talent shortages, cybersecurity, competitive pressures, the cost of technology, very important. And then we want to look at your company's capabilities in coordination or conjunction with the opportunities that exist in the marketplace. Here's a short list of items where an IT database type company might be able to look at expansion possibilities. And then we want to benchmark these things. If you're in the medium size business world and you can drive cost out of your system with digital leverage, which means automation in your industry, then that's something you need to seriously consider. Customer economics. Are you going to retain business? Typical company is going to lose 10% of their business every year. Wow, that's painful. If you're at 95% retention, you're doing really well. Anything above 95%, that's extraordinary. Put a lot of effort into that type of retention thing, realizing that new business is harder won than existing business. Understanding customer acquisition costs. How much do you spend in sales and marketing activities to gain a customer? As you look at, and I would encourage you to pause on this particular slide and look at how many new accounts you get versus the money that you spent to get those accounts, and what does it cost you to bring somebody on board, and determine what type of return you're receiving. You can do ratios there to help you understand your expandability capabilities. Also be aware of the return on investment formula, which is similar. All you have to do is take the amount of revenue that it took you to gain a new business, look at the projected income, and then correlate that into a percentage. For a IT services company, a good ROI is 15 to 25%. Outstanding, 25 to 40, and then 40 and above, excellent. So camp out on this slide, run some numbers for yourself, and see how you stack up. Notice the header on this slide is Digital and Tangible Products Company. You want to look at your revenue growth on an annual basis, see how you're stacking up, how your gross margins are. Will you be able to sustain a hit? What your customer acquisition costs are. We just went over that. And what your long-term value to cost of acquisition ratios are. The churn rate, which means how many customers you're losing on a percentage basis, and then some performance metrics like fulfillment rate and things of that nature. Those are important criteria. Camp out here. There's an explanation slide here, which gives you about 5 or 6 different criteria. It also allows you to do a customer satisfaction survey, which are very important questions for you to have feedback. This is in your document. Also, phase digital transformation. If you're dealing in an old non-digital world, there are things you can do. For example, when I started as a buyer in the oilfield supply industry, we did things literally with pencil and paper. We've moved so far beyond that. There are self-service portals out there which can drive cost out of your business. AI can help you a great deal there now, and there are software companies that would love to help you adapt into this, and then as well as forecasting models. Software packages like enterprise resource planning, which will take the comprehensive responsibilities of your entire company and put it into one dashboard. In the same respect, material requirements planning, if you're in the distribution or manufacturing world, this would be an excellent software package for you to have available. If you don't feel competent up there in regards to these things, there are companies out there that would be more than happy to help you. And then we want to make sure that we're partnering with the right type of customers. There's an evaluation criteria in the document to help you understand who will be a good partner and who won't. Voice of customer platforms, make sure you get feedback. We want to see customer satisfaction scores, their willingness to promote you, and then how they are performing for you. And then, of course, that all important retention analysis. Your people, how do they feel about you, your company, their job, the leadership in the company? What are you doing to hire well? And we want to make sure that your folks are reasonably happy. If you find the perfect job, keep it. They don't exist. However, you need to make it as fair as possible. You need to fairly compensate. Make sure there's some career advancement. Communicate. Allow these folks a work-life balance. Don't push them to the edge. Leadership continuity means exactly what it says. Are you stable? Are you looking at the future? Have you got succession plans in place? And is there some area of authority that allows the company to function well, but also understand they are accountable? Leadership's benefits, operational consistency, lower turnover, better planning, financials, the whole 9 yards. Competitive battle card purpose, we want to look at your strengths versus your competition's weaknesses. In the IT industry, perhaps you'll notice, and this is where your sales force and your marketing team need to give you feedback with slow implementation, limited support, poor service consistencies as an example, where you can exceed that in your supply capabilities. So what we want to do is make sure that you take all these criteria, and we'll have a slide for that in just a second, that allow you to determine if you're ready to expand. This is in your full document. And here's the expansion criteria. You have 20 criteria, which allows you to look at performance metrics, both hard number metrics and also sentiment type metrics, so you understand where you have the strengths to launch out and spend some extra money to gain extra income. This is important. Make sure you take some time to look at this, not only in the slide presentation, but also distinctly in your full document for one of the 3 industries where you might be participating, or go out and extrapolate some data for your particular company. Very good. That is a brief overview of what you're going to receive